August 1675, the Plaza Mayor of Santa Fe, New Mexico. The air is thin, high desert dry. Dust cakes the lips. A Tewa man named Pope stands stripped to the waist, his back muscles clenched. Around him, a crowd of Spanish settlers, Franciscan friars, and forced Pueblo converts watches in silence. Governor Juan Francisco Trevino has passed sentence. The charge, idolatria, sorcery. Trevino, in a wave of religious fervor, has arrested 47 Pueblo medicine men. 4 have already been sentenced to death. 3 are hanged. 1 more cheats the rope, taking his own life. Now it is Pope's turn. The lash cuts the air with a sound like a ripping sheet. It lands. Pope's body convulses, but he makes no sound. He is a spiritual leader, a man of standing from the San Juan Pueblo. He is being publicly, methodically humiliated. The Spanish officials see a docile subject being put in his place. They see a primitive belief system being justly and righteously scourged from the land. They see a simple, conquered man. They do not see the man who will, in 5 years, orchestrate their apocalypse. They do not see the strategist. They do not see the fury they are carving into his back, one stripe at a time. This is the story of a secret. Not the secret of the Makah in the Pacific Northwest, but one just like it. It's the story of how a people, the Pueblo of New Mexico, were seen by a vast empire as a simple canoe, primitive, passive, and fit only for small tasks. And it's the story of how one man, forged in humiliation, taught that canoe how to hunt the whale that was the Spanish Empire. For 80 years, the Spanish had ruled New Mexico with the whip and the cross, but they fatally underestimated the power of the Pueblo faith they tried to extinguish. By the end of this film, you will understand the brilliant, secret system of coordination and the raw spiritual power that allowed thousands of warriors from over 24 rival villages to rise as one and achieve the impossible, the complete and total expulsion of a European colonial power. This is the story of the most successful indigenous revolt in North American history. Section 1. The Canoe. The world of the Pueblo people was not one kingdom, but a constellation of villages scattered across the high mesas and river valleys of the Rio Grande. They were the Tewa, the Tiwa, the Tano, the Keres, the Jemez, the Zuni, the Hopi. They spoke 6 different languages. They often fought. To the Spanish conquistador, this was a fractured, primitive land, ripe for exploitation. When Don Juan de Oñate first claimed this land for Spain in 1598, he brought 2 things, the sword and the cross. What followed was 80 years of systematic dismantling. The Spanish crown implemented the encomienda system. It was, in practice, slavery. Pueblo men and women were forced to labor in Spanish fields and weave textiles in Spanish workshops, all for no pay. But the sword only took their labor. The cross demanded their soul. Franciscan friars fanned out across the pueblos, erecting massive adobe churches that dwarfed the native kivas. They were intolerant of the native faith, a complex, ancient web of beliefs that governed the rain, the corn, and the sky. To the friars, the Cachinas, the ancestral spirits central to Pueblo life, were demons. Footage of Cachina dolls, ancient petroglyphs. The Spanish suppression was relentless. They dismissed the Pueblo as gente sin razón, people without reason. They interrupted sacred dances, burned Cachina dolls in public bonfires, and destroyed the subterranean kivas, the holy chambers where the Pueblo connected with their gods. Traditional leaders who resisted were arrested. They were charged with witchcraft, their hair shorn to shame them. They were flogged, imprisoned, or, like the 3 men in 1675, hanged. This was the Spanish policy, to break the Pueblo, to shatter their beliefs, to turn them into a docile, Christianized peasant class. They were, in the Spanish view, a simple canoe, battered and waterlogged, useful only for serving the great Spanish galleon. But the Spanish forgot something. A canoe is not just wood. It is a vessel. It holds the spirit of its people. And in 1675, that spirit was given a name and a face. Governor Juan Francisco Trevino was a hard man, a zealous Catholic who saw devils in every native ritual. His 1675 crackdown was the most brutal yet. 47 medicine men, the spiritual spine of the Pueblo people, were rounded up and dragged in chains to Santa Fe. Among them was Pope. When the sentence was read, flogging for him and his compatriots, death for 3 others, the Spanish expected submission. They expected fear. They did not expect what happened next. A force of 70 armed Pueblo warriors marched into Santa Fe. They surrounded the governor's palace, the Palacio de los Gobernadores. They were not asking. They were demanding. They told Trevino that if he did not release the medicine men, they would kill every Spaniard in the city and then retreat to the mountains to fight a war to the death. Trevino, his garrison stretched thin, was stunned. He saw the cold resolve in their eyes. He backed down. Pope and the other prisoners were released, their backs bleeding, their bodies bruised, but their eyes opened. They had seen 2 things: the absolute, bottomless nature of Spanish intolerance, and the fact that the Spanish could be made to fear. Pope was exiled from his home of San Juan Pueblo. The Spanish, thinking they had rid themselves of a troublemaker, banished him to the most remote, northernmost village, the fortress-like Taos Pueblo. It was the single greatest mistake they ever made. They had not banished a broken man. They had sent a prophet into the wilderness to forge his weapon. They had taken a simple canoe and sent it away to learn the Makah secret, how to hunt a whale. Section 2. The Caver and the Cord. Taos was a fortress of dried earth, clinging to the base of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. It was remote, self-contained, and wary. To the Spanish, it was the edge of the known world. To Pope, it was the perfect forge. He was not just a medicine man. He was now a man consumed by a single divine purpose. He had seen the heart of the Spanish god, and it was a heart of iron. His own gods, the Kachinas and the spirits of the earth, now spoke to him in the darkness. He descended into a kiva. This itself was a capital crime. The friars had ordered these sacred chambers filled with dirt, their ladders burned. But here, in secret, the kiva lived. The air was cool, thick with the smell of smoke, juniper, and something ancient. By the dim light of a small fire, he met with the other leaders he had summoned. El Saca from Taos, El Chato from Jemez, Tupatu from Picuris, and Naranjo from Santa Clara. They were not natural allies. They represented villages that had bickered and raided each other for generations. Pope let the silence hang. Then he spoke. He didn't speak of taxes or labor or land. He spoke of the spirits. He told them the Kachinas had come to him from the Sipapu, the sacred place of emergence. They had told him the world was unbalanced. The Spanish friars, with their crews and their angry god, had driven the rain away. The corn was failing. The people were sick. This was not a war of politics, he insisted. This was an act of cosmic cleansing. The Spanish had to be scoured from the land, not just defeated but removed. Their god, their language, their names, their animals, all of it. The world had to be remade as it was before. The leaders listened. They saw the fire in his eyes, the authority of a man who had been to the threshold of death and returned. He had unified their grievance. Now he would unify their action. The problem was immense. The Pueblo villages were scattered over 250 miles, from Taos in the north to the Hopi villages far to the west in modern-day Arizona. They were separated by brutal mountains and searing deserts, and the Spanish controlled the center, the capital of Santa Fe, a garrison of professional soldiers under Governor Antonio de Otermin. If Taos rose alone, Otermin's cavalry would ride north and slaughter them. If the Hopi rose alone, they would be isolated and starved. The attack had to be a single coordinated thunderclap. But how? They had no written language the Spanish couldn't read. They had no courier system that wasn't watched by friars and encomienda bosses. Any message sent could be intercepted. This was the moment the canoe became the killer. Pope revealed his plan. It was the Makah secret. It was simple, indigenous, and brilliant. He held up a quipo, a cord fashioned from maguey fiber. Tied into it were a series of knots. This was the clock. Popé and his small council of war prepared dozens of identical cords. Each knot represented one day. He gathered his most trusted messengers, the fastest young men of the pueblos, the Painanes. They were to run. They would run in total secrecy, at night, avoiding the main roads, using ancient paths only they knew. They would slip into each pueblo, from Picures to San Ildefonso, from Santo Domingo to Jemez, and all the way to the Zuni. They were to find the village cacique, the traditional leader, and deliver the cord and the message. The message was verbal, passed from Popé's lips. You are to untie one knot every morning. Keep this hidden from the Spanish. When the last knot is undone, that is the day the world will be renewed. That is the day we will strike. The plan was set. The final knot would be untied on the morning of August 11th, 1680. In late July, the runners dissolved into the landscape. They were ghosts. In the Spanish capital of Santa Fe, Governor Otamin sat in his palace, drafting reports on the harvest. The friars preached in their churches, confident in the conversion of the docile Indians. They had no idea that a silent, living fuse had been lit and was now burning its way across the entire territory. The countdown had begun. Section 3. The Breaking of the Cord. August 9th, 1680. 2 days remain. In the Palacio in Santa Fe, Governor Antonio de Otermin signs a letter. The colony is quiet. The summer has been dry, the harvests meager. His primary concerns are supply caravans and the ever-present threat of Apache raids. The Pueblos. They are a labor force. They are sullen, perhaps, but they are broken. He is wrong. The conspiracy is too vast. It involves thousands of people across 6 language groups, united by a single, desperate faith, and a secret that large cannot be kept forever. In the Tano villages just south of the capital, Christianized Pueblo leaders, loyal to their Spanish masters, grow suspicious. They see the secret meetings. They see the runners. They capture 2 young men from Tesuc Pueblo, Catua and Omtua. They are 2 of Popé's Painanes. They are dragged before the local Spanish authorities. The questions are brutal. The torture is swift. The 2 runners confess everything. They reveal the plot. They name the leader, Popé, the sorcerer from San Juan, and they reveal the signal, the knotted cord. The news hits Santa Fe like a cannonball. Governor Otamin is paralyzed, not by fear, but by disbelief. It is impossible. The Tewa, the Keres, the Yemez. All of them? Rising together? He is staring at a report that describes the annihilation of his entire colony, planned for 2 days from now. His disbelief shatters. He acts. He dispatches his maestre de campo, Francisco Gomez Robledo, with a detachment of cavalry. They are to ride north hard, arrest Popé, and seize the leadership at Taos and Tesuque. He sends other alcaldes fanning out, warnings flying to every isolated estancia and mission. Arm yourselves! The Indians rebel on the 11th! But the high desert has eyes. The Painanes who have been watching the roads see the Spanish riders leaving Santa Fe in a cloud of dust. They see the urgency in the horses' lather. They run. They run faster than the Spanish horses can travel. They run to Tesuc, to San Ildefonso, to Taos. They find the Pueblo leaders waiting for the last knot to be untied. The message is breathless, desperate. We are discovered. The Spanish know. They are coming. In the Kivas, a terrible silence falls. The plan 5 years in the making is broken. Their leaders will be hanged, the revolt crushed before it can begin. Popé receives the news. He has 2 choices, surrender to the inevitable or unleash the storm now. He chooses the storm. He gives the final order. The date is irrelevant. The time is tonight. The signal is the fire. August 10th, 1680, dawn. At Tesuque Pueblo, less than 10 miles north of the capital, Fray Juan Pio raises to say Mass. He walks to the church. It is empty. The village is silent. Uneasy, he walks out towards the cornfields with a single Spanish soldier. He finds the Pueblo men. They are not dressed for Mass. They are painted for war. Their faces are a terrifying mask of ochre and black. The friar sees the war clubs, the lances, the obsidian-tipped arrows. He raises his cross. "What is this, my children?" he pleads. "Are you mad?" A warrior named El Popé, a different man from the leader, steps forward. He looks at the cross, the symbol of his people's oppression. He speaks a single word. "No." The first blow lands. Fray Pio falls. The soldier is cut down beside him. The first blood of the purge has been spilled. The runners are already flying, but now they carry a new message. It is not a knotted cord. It is the cry of "Kill!" From Taos in the north to Santo Domingo in the south, the kivas empty. Warriors pour into the plazas. The sound of the mission bells is drowned out by the sound of war drums. In the isolated estancias, Spanish families look up from their breakfast to see their Pueblo servants walking toward them, no longer with tools, but with knives and hatchets. The docile canoe has just rammed the galleon. The Makah's secret is out, and the most violent 24 hours in New Mexico's history has begun. Section 4. The Red Harvest. The high desert became a tinderbox. The spark from Tesuque caught the wind and ignited the entire Rio Grande Valley. It was not a chaotic riot. It was a systematic, ritualistic purge. At Taos, the Pueblo warriors, long considered the most warlike by the Spanish, joined with their Apache allies. They swarmed the mission, killing the 2 resident friars and every Spaniard in the valley. They set the massive church, a fortress of faith, to the torch. At Picuris, warriors cut down the local priest and the handful of settlers. They bathed their arrows in the blood of the Spanish, a ritual act to consecrate the war. South, at Santo Domingo, the caciques had long resented the friars. Now they dragged 3 priests from the convento. They were not just killed, they were martyred in a grim inversion of their own faith. They were stripped, tied to the hooves of horses, and dragged through the village streets until they were torn apart. The church, one of the most beautiful in the territory, was looted, its sacred vessels desecrated, and its altar hacked to pieces before the walls were set on fire. The Spanish in their isolated estancias had nowhere to run. They were surrounded by a land that had suddenly become foreign and lethal. A Spanish hacendado near Jemez, a man who had commanded Pueblo laborers for 20 years, barricaded his family in his main house. He watched in horror as his own encomendado servants, men he had known, flogged and fed for decades, calmly piled firewood against his doors and set his home ablaze. This was Popé's true genius. It was not just a military rising, it was a spiritual one. The warriors were not just killing Spaniards, they were cleansing the world. They entered the churches on horseback, a profound act of defilement. They climbed to the bell towers, not to ring the bells for Mass, but to smash them, to silence the sound that had governed their lives. They ripped the friars' vestments to shreds. They broke open the tabernacles. They took the statues of Christ, the Virgin Mary, and the saints, the symbols of the Spanish God who had demanded their children be baptized and their kivas be filled, and they burned them in the plazas. They danced the Kachina dances in the smoking ruins of the naves, welcoming their own gods back into a land that had been purified by fire. Within 48 hours, the northern provincia was wiped clean. Over 400 Spaniards were dead. This included 21 of the 33 Franciscan friars in New Mexico. The dead were not casualties of war. They were victims of an execution. But not all were killed. The Pueblo warriors, in a calculated act, allowed some to escape. Terrified, half-clothed and weaponless, survivors from Taos, Picuris, and the Santa Cruz Valley stumbled south on foot. They were herded by the attacks, funneled down the Rio Grande Valley toward the one place the Pueblo warriors wanted them to go, the capital, Santa Fe. Governor Otamine, barricaded in the Palacio, received the first survivors on August 13th. They were hysterical, incoherent, babbling of burning churches and murdered priests. He had sent his cavalry north, and it had vanished, swallowed by the uprising. The reports came one after another, a drumbeat of annihilation. San Ildefonso, fallen. Santo Domingo, fallen. Jemez, fallen. He looked out from the walls of his palace. He could see them, On the foothills of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, just north of the city, the signal fires were burning. Thousands of them. The Tewa, the Tano, and the Tao's warriors were gathering. They were painting their faces. They were chanting. The entire Pueblo world was descending on Santa Fe. Governor Otamin, with his 1,000 settlers, mostly women, children, and terrified civilians, and perhaps 100 professional soldiers, was completely, terrifyingly alone. The canoe had become a fleet, and it was now surrounding the whale. Section 5. The Siege of Santa Fe. August 15, 1680, the Feast of the Assumption. On a normal day, the plaza would be filled with a solemn procession. Instead, it is a refugee camp. Over 1,000 Spanish men, women, and children are crammed into the adobe walls of the Palacio de los Gobernadores. The air is foul, the heat is oppressive. The animals they manage to save, sheep, cattle, horses, are penned in with them, their cries mixing with the prayers of the terrified. Governor Otamin stands on the rampart, his breastplate hot to the touch. He looks north. They are here. They pour down from the hills, a living tide of over 2,500 warriors. They are not a disorganized mob. They move with purpose. The Tewa, the Tano, the Keres, led by a Tano man named Juan. They carry the captured Spanish banners, the lances, the arquebuses taken from the dead. They do not attack. They stop just outside the range of the Spanish guns. Juan, the war leader, rides forward on a captured horse, wearing the stolen vestments of a priest. He stops, a figure of grim mockery. He doesn't shout. His voice carries in the thin air. He offers Otamin a choice. He holds up 2 crosses. One is red, for war, the other is white, for peace. If Otamin chooses the white cross, he must swear to take every Spaniard and leave New Mexico forever, immediately. If he chooses the red cross, the siege will begin, and no man, woman, or child will be spared. Otamin is a Spanish hidalgo. He is a soldier of the king. He does not negotiate with heathens, especially not with sorcerers dressed in the robes of a martyred priest. He orders his men to fire a volley over their heads. The red cross has been chosen, the Pueblo warriors answer. They surge forward, occupying the adobe houses of the abandoned city. They set fire to the San Miguel Chapel, the oldest church in Santa Fe. The thick, acrid smoke of burning juniper beams rolls over the Palacio, stinging the eyes of the defenders. For 2 days it is a stalemate. The Spanish cannon, the versos, fire into the occupied houses, shattering adobe walls. The Pueblo warriors answer with captured arquebuses and a hailstorm of arrows. Otamin knows he cannot win a siege. He has 1,000 mouths to feed and almost no water. He must break them. He gathers his 100 professional soldiers, all he has left. They are armored, mounted, and desperate. The gates of the Palacio swing open, and they charge, shouting, "Santiago!" the ancient war cry of the Reconquista. They slam into the Pueblo line. The steel of Toledo meets obsidian and wood. The cavalry charge is brutal, but the Pueblo warriors do not break. They have tasted victory. They fight with the fury of men defending their gods. The Spanish are forced back, dragging their wounded, leaving several dead behind. The gates are barred. The charge has failed. Then, the Pueblo leaders show their true strategic brilliance. They shift their focus. They are not just warriors. They are farmers. They know this land. They know its lifeblood. They move to the Acequia Madre, the main irrigation ditch that brings water from the Santa Fe River into the Palacio. With stone tools and bare hands they divert it. The sound of flowing water, the only sound of life for the settlers, trickles, slows, and stops. Silence falls over the Palacio. Otamin has water in his wells, but it is not enough for 1,000 people and their livestock. Within hours, the animals begin to low with thirst. By the next day, the children are crying. The stench of the crowded compound, mixed with blood and fear, becomes unbearable. The well water turns foul. Thirst is now their primary enemy. Sickness, dysentery, begins to spread. The Pueblo warriors do not attack. They wait. They chant. They let the sun and the thirst do the work. Inside the walls, Otamin faces a horrific reality. He is not a governor, he is the custodian of a mass grave. His people will be dead in days, from thirst if not from arrows. He has one last, desperate move. Not a sally, not a negotiation, a breakout, a running, desperate fight for their lives, south, out of the city, out of the valley, out of New Mexico. He gives the order. Prepare to abandon Santa Fe. Section 6. The Long Walk. August 21st, 1680, before dawn. The air inside the Palacio is thick with the stench of death, sickness, and unadulterated fear. The wells are dry. The children's cries have faded to weak moans. Governor Otermin gives the order. It is salida o muerte, breakout or death. The remaining soldiers, perhaps 100 strong, form a hollow square. They are haggard, their armor dented, their faces grimed with smoke and despair. Into this square they pack the survivors. The women, the children, the handful of friars who made it to the capital, and the last of the livestock. This is not an army, it is a funeral procession, and its participants are still alive. The heavy gates of the Palacio groan open. Otamin, on his horse, takes a breath and raises his sword. Santiago. The cry is thin, desperate. The Spanish column lurches forward into the plaza. The Pueblo warriors, who had been waiting for the final collapse, are momentarily stunned by the suicidal charge. They rain arrows from the rooftops of the surrounding houses, but the Spanish do not stop. They are not trying to win the city, they are trying to flee it. They punch through the thin line of warriors blocking the southern road. The sound of their retreat is a chaotic din. The clatter of armor, the wailing of women, the screams of men struck by arrows, the terrified braying of mules. They do not look back. Behind them, the Pueblo warriors swarm into the Palacio. They roar in triumph. After 80 years, the seat of Spanish power, the symbol of their oppression, has fallen. They tear the Spanish coat of arms from the walls. They set fire to the archives, burning the records of their encomienda debts and their forced baptisms. Santa Fe, the holy faith, is theirs. But for Otamin and his column, the ordeal has just begun. They are 1,000 refugees, most on foot. Their destination is El Paso del Norte, the next Spanish outpost, over 300 miles away. They are marching into the heart of a land that has risen against them, with no food, no water, and almost no ammunition. The August sun is a merciless hammer. The dust kicked up by the column clings to their sun-cracked lips. They stumble past the ruins of San Miguel Chapel, which they had seen burn. They march south, and they are watched. From the high mesas, from the cover of the bosque along the river, the Pueblo warriors track them. They are led now by Alonso Catiti, a Keres leader. They do not mount a full-scale attack. They do not need to. They are herding the Spanish. When a settler strays too far from the column, an arrow finds him. When a soldier drops from thirst, warriors swarm, and he is never seen again. At night, the Spanish huddle together in a dry camp, listening to the war drums and the victory chants echoing from the hills. It is a psychological torture, a constant reminder of their absolute defeat. With every mile, the horror of their isolation deepens. They pass the estancias of their friends, the missions where they had prayed. They are all smoking rubble. The bodies are everywhere. They find Fray Luis de Morales from San Ildefonso, his body mutilated. They find the settlers from the La Cañada Valley, men and women, laid out in a grim tableau, their lives ended by the very people who had served them. This is the great, humiliating reversal. The conquistadors, the masters of the New World, the men who believed God had given them this land, are being driven out like cattle. Their armor is a burden. Their swords are useless. Their God is silent. Otamin, the proud governor, is reduced to a guide, leading 1,000 starving ghosts through a landscape of their own making. They reach Isleta Pueblo, south of modern-day Albuquerque. This was the one pueblo that had not joined the revolt. Otamin had prayed they would find sanctuary here, food, water. They find it abandoned. The inhabitants, fearing retribution from their fellow pueblos, have fled. The last hope is gone. They stumble on, collapsing at the banks of the Rio Grande, drinking the muddy water alongside their animals. They cross the river, a baptized column reversing its own conquest. By the time they stagger into El Paso del Norte in late September, they are broken. More than 2,000 Spaniards have been reduced to a starving band of 1,146 survivors. They have lost everything: their homes, their wealth, their provincia. Back in Santa Fe, Pope stands in the reclaimed plaza. He is the master of New Mexico. The Spanish are gone. The world has been cleansed. He issues his edicts. The great church is to be torn down, stone by stone. The palacio is to be remade into a pueblo. The people must wash in the river, using yucca root to scrub away the stain of baptism. They must drop their Christian names. They must abandon the Spanish language. They must divorce the spouses they married in the church. The old ways, he commands, will return. The Colonies will bring the rain. The corn will grow. The world will be in balance once more. The canoe has hunted the whale. It has driven it from the sea. But victory is one thing. Building a new world is another. Section 7. The Burden of Victory. Pope stood as the undisputed master of a liberated land. He had achieved the impossible. He had, as the Makah legend demanded, killed the whale. He moved into the Palacio de los Gobernadores, the very building that had been the seat of his oppressors. He had promised the people a new world, a return to the old ways, a restoration of balance. He had promised that once the Spanish god was expelled, the Colonies would return, and with them, the rain. The Colonies did not come. The sky remained a hard, unforgiving blue. The drought that had plagued them under the Spanish did not break. It deepened. For 8 years, the harvests failed. The corn, the sacred center of Pueblo life, withered on the stalk. The rivers shrank. The people began to starve, and they looked to Pope. But the prophet who had so brilliantly unified them in war was incapable of uniting them in peace. He became the thing he had destroyed. He ruled not as a medicine man, but as a Spanish governor. He dressed in the finery of Otomín, demanded tribute from the other villagers, and commanded obedience. The man who had been flogged for sorcery now hunted his own rivals. He ordered the execution of Naranjo of Santa Clara, his former ally. The great alliance, forged in the secret kiva at Taos, a unity built on a common enemy, shattered the moment that enemy was gone. The Pueblo world fractured. The Keres, the Tewa, the Jemez, they returned to their ancient rivalries, fighting over the scarce food and the shrinking water. The land was free, but it was starving and consumed by civil war. The canoe had killed the whale, but now it was being swamped by its own victory. Pope died in 1688, a disillusioned and hated man. The news of the chaos, the drought, and the infighting trickled south to El Paso. The Spanish had not forgotten. In 1692, 12 years after their humiliating retreat, a new governor, Don Diego de Vargas, marched north up the Rio Grande. He did not find Pope's united confederacy. He found scattered, starving, exhausted villages, many of whom were as tired of fighting each other as they had been of fighting the Spanish. The Reconquista was swift. De Vargas, using a combination of force and diplomacy, retook Santa Fe. The Spanish were masters of New Mexico once more, and yet it was not a return to the old ways. The Spanish, too, had learned a lesson. They had learned it at Tesuque, in the ruins of their churches, and on the long, desperate walk to El Paso. They never again abolished the encomienda system of forced labor. They never again launched a full-scale campaign to destroy the Pueblo religion. The friars were forced to accept a syncretic faith, one where the kiva could exist in the shadow of the cross, where the Kachina dance and the Catholic Mass could be performed by the same people. The Pueblo Revolt of 1680 was not a permanent military victory, but it was an absolute and permanent cultural one. The Makah secret Pope discovered was not just how to kill the whale, it was how to force the whale to recognize the spirit in the canoe. By rising as one, the Pueblo people saved their faith, their identity, and their world. They had fatally underestimated the power of Pueblo faith, and no one would ever make that mistake again. The story of Pope and the Pueblo Revolt is a powerful reminder that a people's faith cannot be extinguished. it can only be sharpened. What part of this incredible story of resistance and coordination amazed you the most? If you found this history as fascinating as we do, please share this video with a friend and subscribe for more hidden stories of how the world was shaped.